You are listening to the Information Security Innocent Podcast, episode 49, originally released on March 18th, 2021. I'm Josh Amishav. Today we're going to talk about getting into the world of pen testing. Gabrielle Botbol joins us to share her story. My three main takeaways from our conversation were 1, the best resources for teaching yourself to be a pen tester. 2, some strategies to gain credibility, which will help you land a job in infosec. And 3, which certs are worth the investment. You'll enjoy those two things plus a bunch of other tips along the way. Direct support for this podcast comes from BreachSense. If you need visibility into your clients, employees, or third-party suppliers' breach credentials before criminals exploit them, then head on over to breachsense.io to apply for a free 7-day trial. And now, here's my conversation with Gabrielle. Gabrielle Botbol, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So we normally start off with who you are and what do you do. So who are you?
So I am a pen tester. I'm actually currently an offensive security consultant for Desjardins. And I am also a cybersecurity blogger and a podcaster.
Awesome. So how did you get into infosec?
So I don't have a linear background that led me straight to cybersecurity. After high school, I studied dramatic arts to become an actress, and to finance this training, I was also a receptionist in the luxury hotel industry in Paris. So I chose this orientation at first because as a girl, I thought that I was limited in my career choice. But even then, in my spare time, I programmed websites about theater and art in general. And after traveling, I met people and I got to know myself a little better. So I decided to reorient myself at 26 years old by training in application development with a bachelor degree in computer science. So immediately afterwards, I worked for a large company as a developer. But then again, I wasn't sure about the security of the apps I delivered. So and more personally, I've always had justice at heart. So the field of cybersecurity actually addresses those values. So because it's about protecting business data from individuals and society at large. So that's when I decided to look up about cybersecurity, and I got really passionate about it, and I decided to challenge myself to become a pen tester. And I wrote everything about this journey on my blog and collected all the resources for self-education. And a year and a half after this, I got my first position as a pen tester in Montreal. And now since last Monday, as I just told you, I'm an offensive security consultant at Desjardins in Montreal.
Cool. Out of curiosity, how were you developing the websites? It was like PHP?
It was HTML at first, so it was not a dynamic website at the beginning. And then I got to learn about PHP, and I got very passionate about how you could get away from Windows already at the beginning, because computers were delivered with Windows at the time, and you could not choose. Now you have more options. So I decided to learn Linux. And I also started to program websites and everything.
Oh, I actually have a somewhat similar background, minus the dramatic arts studies. But I also started out just writing HTML, then moved over to playing with Linux tools. So you've blogged a bit about using CTF sites, capture the flag sites, for learning. What are your favorite CTF sites, and why do you recommend them?
So I would usually recommend TryAcme for people who do not have prior experience in pen test, because it's very good for this, because you even have a box that explains you how to use TryAcme. So this is very cool. And what I like is that their free account gives you access to many bugs. And also, if you have the budget of $10 a month, it's definitely worth it, because you can engage in a learning pathway and you will get a certificate in the end. And another good platform, but for more advanced people, it's Hack the Box. And you can also practice for free. And they also offer a learning pathway if you subscribe. And also, I like to recommend VulnHub, because you can actually download the VM and set up a lab on your own. And I think it's very important to know how to set up a lab. So it's definitely something you should be able to do. And for people who like small challenges once in a while, I would recommend rootme.org, and also Over the Wire War Games for those who would like to get better using Linux, because it's also a good skill to have.
So you talk about setting up a lab, but you're talking about setting up something like VirtualBox. So what do you mean?
VirtualBox, and be able to connect the machine between them so that you can reach one machine with another machine, and like put up a web server if you want to try for web application, or just make an nmap to the other machine to start a pen testing, network pen test, and things like this.
Cool. So now you mentioned you at age 26 you went back to get a computer science degree. Now that I guess you've blogged about self-study to get into pen testing, what would you do differently if you were going to go on this path now, knowing what you know now? What would you do differently?
I think I would have used vulnerable virtual machine earlier, like WebGoat and Mutilide. Those are OWASP projects. And I would have used them with a walkthrough, because I think it's a good way to practice and feel comfortable and not have the frustration when you're stuck somewhere. You can have a look at the write-up and the go through and just do it in a Zen way, if I say so. And also, TryHackMe did not exist at the time, but I would definitely have loved to have it, because Hack the Box is a very good platform. But as I say, it's not for beginners, and it can be intimidating, when TryHackMe is very good. So this is, I wish I had.
Do you feel like your degree though gave you skills that you would not have been able to get through self-study?
That's actually a good question. I would say that the degree was very helpful to get introduced to programming. But this is also something you can do by training yourself, because there are plenty of platforms for this online. So I think the degree gave me the legitimacy to be here. Like I could say to employers, I have a degree. So it's definitely useful, because you really need a degree to be able to break into the field. And also you can get to know people also. This is very, if you're a little shy, this is a way to get to know people, to get to know uh, how to break into the field, to get the basics of everything. And I think that from there you can go on your own. So it would really be like uh, learning the alphabet when you want to be able to write. This would be a first. This would be the alphabet of cybersecurity, if I can say so.
Okay, that makes sense. And I like the social aspect of it. Something I didn't think of. I don't have a degree in computer science. I just want to know what I'm missing out. You've talked before about certificates, and this kind of plays on the same theme. So you mentioned that you felt like a degree helped you get a foot in the door to get a first job. Are certificates required? Which certificates? Where do you spend your time? Where should you focus?
Okay. So in my opinion, certifications are not mandatory, because if you want to sharpen your skills, you can work on CTF platforms, and there are many platforms that can attest of your knowledge without being as costly as certifications. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I do have a certification myself, but it was my former employer who asked me to do it and actually paid for it. And I intend to get other certifications, because well-known certification gave you credit with employer. But on another end, I think it put pressures on beginners, and also to people who are good but are not dealing well with pressure on exams, and for those who cannot afford the cost of the certifications. So something that was really helpful for me when I was looking for an opportunity as a pen tester is my blog, because this is a real portfolio of who I am and the skills I have and everything. And if people are not comfortable with blog, you can also write articles, CTF write-ups, and use dedicated platform, or even LinkedIn, where you have this part when you can write blog articles. So just certifications are useful if you have the means to, if you can afford it. But yes, it's not mandatory. You can also show your skills and use another way to show your skills, like the certifications of TryHackMe, like certifications of many platforms. There's also MOSE Cybersecurity Institute that provides certification at, and you can have a discount if you're a veteran, if you're a woman, or so. You have many possibilities to get your skills certified in a way without having to pay a big price. But if you are more comfortable and if you can afford it, just go for OSCP or e-learn security certifications or things like this.
Okay, yeah, I would just add to that. At least one of the things that worked for me was writing code. So, like back in the day when Nessus was open source, I used to write a lot of plugins for Nessus. But having a good Git, I mean, if that's your thing, if you can program and you're into that, then having a good GitHub profile with lots of code is another way to do it. So now that you're a pen tester, you recently wrote a blog about the right way to write a good pen test report. Can you walk us through what are the components that you think are they feel unnecessary to be in the report?
Well, when I write this blog, it's because I had the certification I mentioned to you, and I was wondering how would beginner would do to write the report, because I think it can be intimidating if you've never done it before. So some tips would be to use the standards and recognize references and include links to those references in your report. Do not neglect the
What's that?
executive
Can
report
you get
part.
just in an example for like the references?
Yeah.
Can you just give an example? What do you mean?
Like for web pen testing, you can refer to OWASP, and for also Portswigger have very well done articles about web pen testing. And so yes, those standards that are recognized by the industry are very useful for reports. And so when you give a link, also what I use a lot in my report actually is books. Like I have Tanya Janka book, which is Alice and Bob Learn Application Security, and this is very useful to write the recommendation. And I would definitely because what I like about it is that you can understand. It gives you the understanding of why you should correct a vulnerability. So you don't get only recommendation, you also get why it is important to apply this recommendation.
It's like meaning the business risk.
Yes, exactly. And because you can give an example. This is also another tip I give, is to uh, put in the context of your customer, put the recommendation in the context of your customer, like explain it as much as possible, explain the vulnerability and the impact it will have on the context of your customer. Like if this is an application for I don't know, like get holidays for your business, or an application that holds a social security number. Well, if someone is able, by, I don't know, an indirect object reference, to have information of someone else, you should explain that with this vulnerability, I was able to access the account of someone else, but I shouldn't be able to, because those are sensitive information for the person. So this is actually very helpful, because they don't have just big words like indirect object reference, like things like this, and you don't like, you need to explain in the context, and so they can understand the impact it could have on their business, and they would be more, I mean, they are willing to change it, because they did a pen test. So it's good for them that they don't feel that the process and the report you gave them was hard to read and not very in French we say sur mesure, so adapted to their context. And The executive report is also very helpful for non-technical people of the organization. So you have to be sure that it's clear for them and that you are able to explain technical concepts simply.
Okay, so one of the things that I come across a lot in pen tests is that companies will only fix anything that's like red. So if it's like critical, high risk, mediums, or maybe. So when it comes to like risk rating methodologies, there's a lot of them seem to be somewhat subjective, right? So if you take the CVSS score, you can manipulate it to make things higher than they are supposed to be or lower than they're supposed to be. So how do you what are your thoughts on rating your findings properly that they'll get the attention they deserve in a way that no matter who the tester that is testing it, you'll come up with the same risk score?
That's a good question, because this is always something that makes me perplexed, like when I want to explain properly the impact. And sometimes, depending on the context, something that would be of medium risk would become a high risk for the context, because the data exposed is very sensitive. What I like, I'm more used to CVSS score, because this is the one I've always used. But I like both CVSS and the WASP, because concerning, like for instance, concerning the attack complexity, OWASP risk rating is good because the threat adjoint factor is more precise. Like you don't have you have a score from 1 to 9. Like for instance, in the confidentiality, you can uh, say which type of files, in a way, because you have more choice. When in CVSS score you have none, low, or high, which is, so I think this would give a more precise score. And maybe if I test something and my colleague tests the same thing, and if we find the same vulnerability, maybe we would have the same score with OWASP risk rating methodology, because of the precision you get with this. But let's face it, the only way to be able to really put in to really put an emphasis on the risk your customer have is to give a good explanation on the report in context, like just I said before, because this is the best way they can understand the impact for them.
Definitely. So how do you stay up to date with all the new research coming out of infosec? What are your resources that you like to follow?
So I like to follow influencers on social media, and of course I have an RSS feed with cert, like US cert or cert FR, which is for France and everything. And I also like to follow ANSSI, which is the French government cybersecurity center. There's also Internet Society and Naked Security. What I like about the cert is that you get the last attacks or the last breach and everything, and it's very interesting to see what are the last trends in this kind of things, and you can learn about them, and you can actually look for them in the mandate you have after. So it's interesting.
And who are the influencers that you like to follow?
I follow Alisa Miller, I follow Tiberius, I follow Tanya Janka, Rana Khalil. Um, I also follow companies or communities like OWASP, like Hack the Box, also because they always have good content, like Portswigger. Yes, all those big names in the industry. Also, like viruses companies have great, like Kaspersky. Yes, they have great content as well, and it's very interesting.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't checked them out. I should do that. So you recently gave a talk at WOSEC about cross-site scripting, so which I wanted to dig in a bit. But what is WOSEC?
So WASAK is a community for women to support women and people who identify as a woman. So we want to WASAK to be a safe space for women, and when they can learn together or just talk to each other. And you can also, if you want mentoring, you can have mentoring. we can also help you find a job or everything. I So I am the chapter leader of WASAK Paris, and I recently joined because I moved to Montreal for my work. So I recently joined WASAK Montreal, and at WASAK Montreal we also we provide workshops, like we have technical workshops, we have also conferences and panels with women who talks and who presents those panels and those workshops. So it's mostly a space for women to feel safe and to learn together without being uncomfortable, and if they have a question, they can ask them away and everything. And if you just need to talk or to say, like, I didn't feel like, if they have an issue or something, they can also talk about it and in a safe space, you know.
Cool. How many branches are there?
Oh, there are so many, and I could send you a link with all the chapters later, because there are many in the world, all everywhere.
Be good. Yeah, add that to the show notes. Okay. So can you tell us a bit about you gave a class on cross-site scripting, which is kind of it's one of those things where it's like a bug that never dies. It's like it just, you fix it in one place and it shows up in another place. Can you tell us a bit about the talk, and about how do you like to find cross-site scripting?
So when I want to find cross-site scripting, well, when I usually try to see the inputs, I check every input, and I try like special chars on them, like quotes, and see how the application behave. And also, I like to use the inspect element tool of the browser to have like a good overview. And of course, burp repeater is very good, because you can test uh, on the same input many different things, and you have the results, and you can like grep the special place when you want the response to scroll on, and so you will see very easily if your payload has been interpreted or not.
Can you dig down a bit about like Inspector? How do you like what's the process of using Inspector to find cross-site scripting?
So you have to right click on if you have something that is reflected, like this is usually you like when you have a reflected input, you have to try XSS on it, because this is the place where they usually are. And so I would right click on it and say inspect element, and click on inspect element, and then I will have the exact place of the code where the input is and the reflected input is, and I can try things to see if my payload is interpreted.
How
Um,
does that? How do you do that? In the
like
in the inspect element, you can just type in like in the console.
no, you type on the input, the text you can input on the website, and then you right click on the reflected feedback you get from the application, and this is where you have the inspect element thing. So I like to try this, but if you want to try again and again and again, the easiest way would be to use burp repeater, or the equivalent in OWASP ZAP, uh, where you will be able to see exactly the changes of what you did in the response. So this is pretty useful. Like I usually like to, when I see a suspicious behavior, I like to have a repeater tab with how the application should react, like with an innocent text string. And then I open another repeater tab with the same request, but with my payloads, my malicious payloads, to try and see on the same tab what is bypass, what if I can bypass some filters or things like this. And there is also a cheat sheet that Portsuger has done, which is very helpful, because you can generate cool payloads by choosing a specific browser. So you can choose the type of browser you have. You can choose the event you want the XSS to use. And of course, I do fuzzing, which is very useful. I take a word list, like there is Daniel Messler's checklist or payload all the thing, and I just fuzz away with the intruder or any other tool.
Cool. Now, finding like reflected cross-site scripting or stored cross-site scripting is I get somewhat easier. It's pretty easy to automate. Finding DOM-based cross-site scripting, at least in burp, seems to be somewhat error prone. Like you got a lot of false negatives. Do you have any suggestions on ways to find DOM based cross-site scripting?
Yeah, they are the harder to trigger. Um, I usually check URLs and search boxes, and I like to have a look in the code of the parameters that are used, and then I can take the parameter, put it in the URL, and see if I can trigger something. And like because the URL are the most common source of DOM-based vulnerabilities, so this would be the way to check if you can find if you want to find specifically DOM vulnerability. And also, what is very helpful is the documentation on Portswigger, because they explain very well DOM XSS, and they have 7 good labs to practice DOM XSS, which is very cool. And the documentation, like the explanation they give on on DOM-based vulnerability is very, very well made, and you can understand very well.
Cool. Now let's talk about like remediating the cross-site scripting. Obviously, it should be remediated in the backend code. Not always possible, and I guess having a defense in depth approach would help. Do you have experience setting up content security policies, which notoriously are somewhat difficult, and if you if you enforce them right away, you tend to start breaking the website. What are your thoughts on using CSP to protect against cross-site scripting?
So I think CSP is very useful because it allows the developer to specify all the sources of content, and that way it avoids that a potential attacker calls their own script for exploitation. So I would recommend following a WASP recommendation on CSP, because what I love about this documentation is that it mentions that CSP is not a substitute for a secure development. It should be used as a bonus security layer. So this would be like the cherry on the top of the XSS prevention cheat sheet that they have, which is very good because uh, this is the best way to prevent XSS. You have to check what input you trust. You have your and also what is very useful are security focused on coding library that they mention is in cross-site scripting prevention cheat sheet. Like people made library that are specifically secure. So instead of trying to code something yourself, just use something that exists and that is recognized as safe. This is a good bet to do, because uh, you are like it's more safe than doing something yourself. And well, yes, be careful with input. Do not just reflect an input. You have to be like the principle is do not trust no one, like in X-Files. Check what input you trust, and because you cannot trust the user. There is always someone who is going to try to do something. So uh, check the input and just treat it before reflecting it.
Yes, no, and it's also like you're querying the database and taking data that you think is fine, but then a user was able to store malicious data there, or you're grabbing like user agent string that was stored, but the attacker manipulated that as well. So like input validation is like one of those things where I feel like you have the 80-20 rule. So if you can solve that, you can solve like 80% of the infosec the AppSec issues, but it's just such a hard problem to solve. And you see that like even huge companies, they're still struggling with cross-site scripting. So for everybody else, for any moderately sophisticated application, it's hard to do. And I like having like the CSP kind of gives you like a backstop to if you do miss something, it gives you that protection. All right, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
That's it for this week. If you have any comments or questions, then tweet at me at Jamoose. And if you got value from this episode, then please share it with a friend. See y'all next week.